What's going on? Welcome to the Par Movement. So my name is Gary Dubs. I was originally a golfer in high school, went to college for golf, and then I transferred schools to go into strength and conditioning, became a D1 assistant strength coach there. I've done it all. I've ran marathons. I've got my body weight down to 165. I've gotten up to 230. I've snatched nearly 300 pounds. And the reason I'm bringing this to you is because I feel like most of the golf fitness instructions out there are very surface level, very just kind of vanilla, basic movements that I think could be improved upon a lot. And so in this channel, if you're new, I'm not gonna say that I know everything. If you have any ideas or inputs, I would love to hear them. But today, I'm gonna show you basically what I'm doing to try to transform my body back into being able to swing faster, but also keep consistent movement, right? Peter Cowan talks about best golfers, typically, they're not only the best manipulators of the face, but they also have the most consistent body movement. And so if you're somebody like, let's say you're, a 30-year-old dad like myself who has been working out a fair amount, you just kind of stop focusing on rotational capacity. And so when we're really just doing a lot of, benching and squatting and deadlifting, or maybe you don't move at all, the same thing kind of typically applies, is that we start to lose, our body's not necessarily, it can rotate, it can produce the movement, but it's going to try and control the force in a way that might be not conducive to the swing. So what I'm trying to do is really bring back my rotational capacity. And so when I say rotational capacity, I don't mean that we're gonna do a bunch of mobility things. Those are good on days that you feel stiff. We'll do some of those to maybe find some sticking points that we could use a little bit more range of motion. But when I'm getting into some power work, I'm going to create rotational capacity with things that are going to integrate my entire body. They're going to load my entire body. They're going to force it to stabilize weight and movement through ranges of motion under load, which is always going to improve your quote unquote mobility so much faster, right? If I'm just doing something, stretching and opening my arm versus I'm doing something with load, which do you think my body has to adapt to faster, right? Always the one with load. So today, I'm gonna run you through how I'm viewing my speed work, my power work. I'm not gonna necessarily, in the first piece, really focus on getting a lot of mobility, because once I expand the mobility, I am going to essentially most likely decrease my power, right? Anytime I was prepping for snatching, squatting, I'm not trying to get super flexible beforehand, right? Because my body's starting to now have to find new proprioception and control the movement in a wider capability range of motion. Today, I did some, just some light things. Yesterday, I was feeling stiff. Now today is, I have what range of motion I have. Let's turn this into power. So, and then we're gonna go and do some Ryp Stick and see if I can't hit a PR today. Terrible night's sleep. I don't think that's gonna be the case. Yeah, I'm definitely blaming it on the baby, even though she slept well. So first things first, for me, lifting, right? Anytime we're doing a lot of benching, anytime you're sitting at a desk a lot, right? We are essentially training that scap to stay very glued in one position to the rib cage, right? When I'm benching, I'm setting, I'm holding, I go down to bench, the bench cuts off the full range of motion of my scap, and so for me, one big piece is getting my scap to remember, if you will, how to rotate around my thoracic, around my rib cage a little bit better. So I'm gonna give you a few of these. I'm not gonna run you through, I'll run you through pretty much everything I would do to get primed to swing the club faster. So first ones are a little bit more movement, and then we're gonna get into some more explosive work. And so where I wanna be with this is in the half kneeling position, and I'm essentially getting 2 for 1. I'm getting some mobility, I'm getting some stability, and I'm just kind of warming up, controlling rotation, and getting that scap moving. So I'm here, kettlebell's up straight, and all I'm going to do is rotate down, look towards the kettlebell, and then come back up. And I'll do it on the other side. So I have the kettlebell in the arm with the knee that is up, and then elbows locked out. And as I rotate down, I look, and now you can see my shoulder has to stay open. This scap is rotating and stabilizing around my body under load, and I'm challenging that hip rotation to integrate with my movement, right? So I would just do 5 to 6 here, nothing crazy. Then you can come in and just look and twist, right? We're isolating a little bit more of the thoracic spine. You're gonna feel as you kind of get around to that side, you're gonna feel some bits that feel a little bit more stiff like myself. And again, all of this is just teaching to stabilize, control motion through range of motion, right? So that's the first one with my scap. Then I'm gonna go into, what did I used to call this? Y rotation, something like that. We'll just call it the wrestler move. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna get my heel and my arm in line. I'm gonna raise my knee up. I'm gonna rotate around. If you don't have the balance, you can tap your foot back here to hold, right? Keep that core engaged. But you'll see, if I keep this shoulder kind of in one spot, my scap has to stabilize that shoulder as my trunk, as my chest is rotating. So it's stabilizing while rotating around my thoracic spine. What is a golf swing, right? Is we are trying to not only give that scap more range of motion, I could do some typical stretches that people show, right? But at the same time, I also want to be increasing my control and my proprioception over my body, right? So if I put it in load, I put it in those two movements, I'm getting the mobility while engaging the control, right? So next, I would move on to something like the hips. And so when we think about the hips, or how I think about the hips, right, is we have the capacity, we have potential for certain muscles to be underdeveloped that are going to limit our range of motion, right? And I'll create a lot more trainings on this, but let's use the hamstrings, for example. Oftentimes, people feel like their hamstrings are tight, and their first go-to is, I need to stretch them to get them loose. The reality is the hamstrings, their job is to stop the quad from blowing your knee backwards, right? Just blowing it in half. The hamstrings are always going to be weaker than the quads. Now, if that difference starts to grow larger and larger because we aren't training our hamstrings, the only other mechanism it has to prevent those quads from blowing your knee off is getting tight, right? And so for me, again, back to this rotational capacity idea, is I want to ensure that every muscle has the adequate structural strength balance. And if I can do that in larger ranges of motion, right, control it, strengthen it, larger ranges of motion, I'm going to keep that range of motion much better and gain it much faster than somebody who's just doing passive stretches, right? You could imagine if somebody who's really flexible at yoga, right? Yes, they're very flexible, but if you got them underneath a golf club, they're gonna look like Gumby, right? They're gonna be very limited control because they're always focusing on just creating this more passive range of motion that doesn't teach the body how to have strength and control throughout large ranges of motion. And so for me, after years of just squatting, lunging, and not really caring about rotational capacity, I'm really working right now on reclaiming some hip internal rotation and also ensuring that my hip rotators have the adequate strength so they're not essentially kind of shutting the body down. So if my short hip rotators, right, we have a few of those that create external rotation. If they are weak, right, they can't necessarily do this, they don't have strength, again, the compensatory mechanism to block internal rotation, which we really need for the golf swing, right? This is internal. They are going to limit, they're going to be a big limiting factor if they're weak, because again, they're running on that compensatory mechanism. So today though, I did my range of motion, I did my strengthening. Now I want to prime the hips to have control through those ranges of motion and start getting a little bit more explosive. All right, so now we're gonna be picking up the pace a bit. I got my little makeshift sling here with the golf club. I'll use that later. But right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this band, I'm gonna make sure I get it on the right side so I'm in view. Nope, wrong chest. Loop it around. And so, right, we're in the golf stance. And as we rotate, this hip needs to internally rotate. And so for me, after years of just weightlifting, trying to be very explosive up and down, not necessarily having that rotational capacity, my body really kind of doesn't like to internally rotate. So in my golf swing, right, as I'm getting into this lack of internal rotation, to compensate, I'll dump my chest up, I'll go into extension, right? My body is trying to jump, extend, when I should be getting a little bit more rotation, right? And so I'm here, I go into this cable, and again, I'm getting load, I'm controlling. You feel this big eccentric stretch on those hip rotators. It's gonna be in your butt. I can kind of rotate my chest a little bit more, but then to get that hip control, right, I'm kind of exploding up and out. And we can even stay a little bit more vertical to not practice extending through the rotation, right? But as I'm going in, I'm starting to get a little bit more explosive. I'm not trying to get a crazy stretch right now for power day, but I'm warming those up. I'll do a few on the other side. So you can see from that end, right? Same thing here. Go in, wind up, pull out. Load up that hip. This one's feeling a little weak today. Internal, out. Rotate the chest. All right. Got a little bit more of that internal rotation, control, strength, right? I'm getting that stretch under load again. And so now I'm going to start winding up some power, right? So this would be my warm up. I'd maybe do 2 rounds of those, keep them short. Maybe, as I'm getting into it, if you have some other sticking parts that, don't necessarily feel is good for you, right? Work on those. But now, we won't run the music because it's not picking it up. So I just got to get primed without music. So when I'm training speed and whenever you're training power, right? Let's say you're Olympic lifting, and back when I was trying to train athletes to be more explosive, right? We are training more of your nervous system to create more power. So it isn't necessarily I'm trying to get strong or develop a muscle. I am trying to teach my nervous system to move faster, be more explosive. And anytime I'm doing that, if I were going full-fledged idiot mode right now, I'd be grunting, I'd be yelling, I'd be jamming the music, anything to stimulate my nervous system to go faster, right? And so when we're in the golf swing, even though it's not necessarily completely a lateral movement, there's still that driving off of the ground. So I kind of got that internal rotation, but now I'm trying to create some explosion of getting out of it. Again, if I were just to do an internal rotation stretch like I talked about, right, and you're just creating more internal rotation motion, it doesn't mean that you have more control. It doesn't mean that you have more capacity to get out of that position. It doesn't mean you've maybe extended that range of motion, but it doesn't mean that you've actually gained a mechanical advantage when it comes to power, right? And so here, you could do this without this. You could literally just jump horizontal. I'll do that sometimes without this, but all I'm doing is I'm kind of winding up and I'm sliding down, right? Same thing here. Now I'm gonna speed it up. Get yourself some cute little booties like that. I'm gonna do a few of those. And then, obviously we want to create more ground force, more capacity to explode off the ground. And so when you're training jumping, there is strength, gaining strength of your body's capacity to move and jump, but then there's also training the stretch reflex of your tendons. And so in Super Training, it's a strength conditioning book written by it's a very prominent strength and conditioning book that was written by a Russian Olympic weightlifting coach. And in there, the big philosophy takeaway is that you could be working on getting stronger in your squats, but the threshold of how strong your squat is going to get is limited by your capacity to jump to create that stretch reflex. And so when I'm jumping, I am trying to gain some strength in the muscles, their capacity, again, a little bit more neuromuscular strength, but then I'm also gonna go into some type of rebounding things, right? Creating capacity in the tendons to quickly deliver force and absorb force, right? Or absorb force and then deliver it quickly. So first one would be, again, I'm trying to, anytime, you see Rory coming up or those long drive guys, they're exploding up, right? That's pressing into the ground. So most of us typically have one leg that isn't as powerful as the other. And so when I can isolate trying to drive off of one leg, I'm going to hopefully even out some of those little asymmetries. So this one's super easy, a box, kind of bringing your hip up to knee height. And all you're gonna do is essentially come in here, drive up as high as you can. As hard as you can, other leg. All right, get warmed up. I'd maybe go back to a set of this and one more of that, and then I'm moving on to some other power movement. So if you ever remember, if you played high school sports, most of us typically did some little plyometric ladder that looked like this. So again, it's one thing for me to be training to get explosive vertically. It's another thing to be training some explosive work with rotation. So if you remember this one, maybe you had a ladder on the ground and coach would have you go, bah, bah, right? Creating hip rotation. Again, I'm creating that power. I'm now integrating, hopefully what I did yesterday to get a little bit more range of motion. I'm integrating that into control and power, right? So again, here, I'd be trying to go as fast as I can, bah, 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 looking like an idiot. And then for me, maybe next set, try to create power with a little bit more hip turn, right? That's the first one, warming up. So that's still, again, priming the nervous system. You can hear me breathing harder. Nervous system starting to get fired up. And now is when I would go into some type of rebounding type jump. So one that I typically like is stepping off a box and then rebounding right onto another box. But you can also do it without. But essentially I'm going to just step down. I'm going to try and explode up immediately or as fast as I can, right? So I'd step down, right? It's much more about training. How fast can I get back off the ground? Stop the force, absorb the force, and come back out. And that is going to be primarily through a tendon stretch reflex. And you're like, oh, I don't want to load my tendons. The reality is that the world's highest high jumpers typically have extremely long Achilles tendons. That's really where we build up that elastic type explosive power, right? NBA players, you look at them, they have rail thin calves because their Achilles is super long. You've never seen a guy who has bricks for calves jumping really high, right? So again, I'm going up, shake it out a second, give yourself a second to see if you can get more explosive. We're not trying to get cardio right now. And I think it's pretty much what I would be doing to then go take the Ryp Stick, which we'll do a little bit of here in a second outside, to prime my nervous system, prime range of motions. Give yourself however many sets you kind of really need to feel juicy, as I would call it. And you want to feel yourself getting to that place where you're really starting to feel like you feel more explosive. And that's when you want to go to the swing trainer. If you're doing more sets and all of a sudden you're starting to feel power output go down because you're getting nervous system fatigue, I would stop there and go do your speed work with whatever speed training apparatus you have. And if you don't, if you stop there in the video, In the part movement, I'm going to break down different exercises, solo exercises. I'm going to show you different days of how I train. Figured today, power, swing speed, hitting the ball further. That's what a lot of people want. This is how I would be doing this. But then what I'm doing on the other days is trying to address any deficits that my body might have from, 15 years of not playing any more rotational sports, getting out of golf, but now fully fledged back in it, and training my body to get better at rotational force, rotational capacity, rotational control. And just in 2-3 weeks, I've taken the Ryp Stick speed up 30 miles per hour. And so hopefully this helps you and the future trainings that we have as well. But let's go swing the speed trainer. All right, so we are out here, Ryp Stick. And disclaimer, right, if you're watch this channel, I'm never gonna give you swing tips. I am by far not the best golfer, right? But if I train my body in a way that is more ideal to golf, I'm going to have more potential when I actually go out and practice and try to get better at golf again. For me, my big struggle is, again, I talked about a few things, but one is so many years of training pecs, training shoulders, training arms, is that and really not training obliques, right? I don't have a great capacity to link up my upper body movement with my lower body movement. And so that's a big focus on for me is I don't need more raw strength. Some golfers do, right? You'll hear Grant Horvath talk about he's got no fast twitch, right? But you look at him, he's a little bit on the not muscular side. So for him, there could be more need to create more strength because the strength is going to limit your capacity to gain speed and power, right? If it's not there, if you can't control your body, you don't have the capacity to, do things like single leg jumps, right? Or you look like a baby giraffe doing them, right? You might need strength. Me, on the other hand, recently, I hit a 440 back squat, right? So strength is not any limiting factor for me, right? And so I'm actually trying to get a little bit less strong, trying to focus more on just bridging that strength together. And then if I let my pecs maybe get a little bit smaller, I can maybe get a little bit better shoulder rotation, so on and so forth. So all that to say is that each person, it's about identifying what is the thing that's going to allow you to have consistency of movement, but also create more power through that range of motion with more control, right? And so, right, Ryp Stick for me, I have realized that I can create high swing speeds with a short swing, and if I go longer, I don't necessarily get faster, right? So for me, I'm really kind of training, keeping that speed, starting with some slower, lower swings, and then building my way up to, again, keep that power out there, right? So for me, the first one is just going to be light, and I'm just going to, and maybe I would do some single arm things. Martin Borgmeyer, he has way better videos on this because he's a long drive champion. But for us dads that don't have a whole lot of time, you want to get a quick workout, you just want to get a little bit better. You don't have spot to swing and drive all day long. My sim ceiling is a little bit too short, right? We have to do what we can with what time that we can. And right, I'm going in here. Let me just not break a second Ryp Stick. But for me, again, I can create good power with short range of motion because I don't have that capacity as I get longer to keep that torque going. So I'm here, and each time trying to get a little faster. 100. Slower, lame. 3. 103. All right, so again, same thing when you're training plyos, 3s to 5s, anytime I was training athletes to be explosive, create more power. Again, the more that we stay closer to that 2 to 4 range, we're really working more of that neuromuscular strength, which is what we want, right? A golf swing is 1 rep. There's no need to make it muscular endurance if we're trying to create more power. And then for me, right, I'd maybe go up now a little bit further, create that separation. 108. 112. right? And so for me, so far the PR on the Rypstick is 130. So I do another 2-3 sets of that. I'd be working up more weight. So let me make this clear because I'm just wound up and my nervous system is firing. But I would start out that shorter swing. I'm gonna do 2-3 reps, very light, go up, medium, maybe heavy. Then I'm gonna go up to this pause, right? Back to light. Then I do medium, 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there. Back to heavy, the second weight in there. I don't have all three in there when I'm doing it. And then the last one would be full swings, right? So I'm coming up, you get the whole idea, but same thing. So when I'm trying to get faster with this though, if I just come out and I'm cold, I haven't done things in the gym to just train my nervous system to be more explosive, I'm not gonna hit a PR on that, right? So anytime you're running fast or you wanna run faster, it's not about pulling a sled to run faster and you're actually running slower. You want to run faster. So over speed training, right? Having somebody pull you to run faster so your nervous system feels what faster is, right? And so when I'm doing that in the gym, I'm getting my body prepped to have the capacity to be faster here, and that's gonna translate. This is video one, we'll get better. Maybe we'll make the studio with better lighting. But if you like it, I'll keep them rolling. If nobody likes them, I'll just stop it, F it. But till next time, go out there and see what you can do in the gym, train your body. For us middle-aged dads trying to get better at golf. Peace.